Hi, I'm Robert Perry, and this evening we're going to do a couple of things different. Number one, I'm actually going to be trying a workflow out to see if it works for something I'm going to do on Friday. I'm excited about something on Friday. Be sure to tune in on Friday. But it means I'm not live right now. I'm actually recording this about an hour and a half before I send this to you. I'm not going to edit it, so fear not if I trip and make a fool of myself. You still get to watch. And I mean, that's kind of the fun bit about watching stuff live anyway. So I'll approximate it as best I can. But on Friday, I'm going to be pre-recording a really exciting interview. I definitely hope you tune in for. It's kind of for libertarians only, though. So if you're watching this and you're not a libertarian, you're not going to be interested. It's just going to be a bunch of libertarians talking about, like, hating roads and stuff like that. You don't want to watch. But for everybody who's interested in furthering the cause of liberty, you should absolutely tune in. The other thing I'm going to be doing that's just a little unusual is I'm going to be phrasing this as a request for a comment. And the reason I'm doing this is about a topic I was really excited about in February. I was talking to a couple of guys about a set of problems. I was trying to come up with a solution. I actually sort of sketched out a solution I'm going to show you tonight on March 8th at the party convention. It's just a sketch, but I wanted to get people thinking about it. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to try to get you thinking about it. Now, I know we're supposed to be thinking about this, and we should think about this. But there's some interesting commonalities between what I'm worried about and this. What I'm worried about is healthcare expenditures as a percent of GDP. In other words, just the cost of healthcare. So, whoopsie, told you you'd get my errors. So, one thing, the first commonality these have is just like abuse of force by a few police officers, too many police officers, disproportionately affects the underprivileged communities, notably the Black communities. So does this. So does the cost of healthcare. And I bothered to show here. I just grabbed this off of usfacts.org. But you can see the percent of GDP that we're spending on healthcare. And it comes down a little here. This is 2016, 17, and 18. But you can see GDP continues to march up quite aggressively. And the problem is, if you're underprivileged, then you're not seeing this bump. So the cost of healthcare to underprivileged communities tends to be disproportionate. And what's going to happen is, just like we didn't listen, well, some of us listened, but just like we failed to solve the problems a few years ago around Black Lives Matter, I think we failed to solve the problem a few years ago with the cost of healthcare. So in that sense, I see some analogy between defund the police and some of the other things I'm hearing. And actually, defund the police is one of my favorite things I'm hearing. Not that we don't want to have police departments, but think of it as rebooting police departments. In that sense, this is pretty interesting. There have been some historical precedences of departments doing this successfully. The problem is it leaves the underlying forces in place, and even where it's been successful historically, I have a pretty strong feeling that the problems will recur. I mean, our police force has not always had this problem as much as it does right now. There's an underlying cause. Similarly, the Affordable Care Act, the intentions may have been good, but it did absolutely nothing to address this problem. I mean, you see it plateau here, but GDP skyrocketing. And even if you go back and look at the act itself, it does very, very little in an attempt to. It focuses on spreading the pain of healthcare, spreading the cost of healthcare, which does nothing for actually decreasing the cost of healthcare. If anything, it's going to liberate certain parties to spend even more. Like we hear the stories about the $2,000 nut or bolt that you can normally buy for like 80 cents, things like that. So I don't think just spreading the pain is gonna fix it. But back to the Black Lives Matter issue, this is one of the reasons I was really excited about what Larry Sharpe was saying. Is he's trying to get to some of the core issues here, and his favorite one he touches on is taking cannabis off of Schedule 1 because it's the first heavy blow to the war on drugs. We have to end the war on drugs. And this is covered by Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Here they have the war on drugs as the root of the tree that causes all these issues. I'm not going over that tonight, but I like to touch on it because it's still on my mind. If we were to do the same for healthcare, it'd kind of be a mess. I didn't really have a nice image to go off of, but I did try to look for something with sort of two trees or two root systems, because in my mind, there's two original problems for the cost of healthcare. One is a rather complicated problem around third-party payer, which is to say healthcare. We're all less sensitive about what an individual thing costs because insurance will cover it. That's why we pay for insurance, and how to do that is a bit of a prickly problem. Another problem, which I think a lot of people are sensitive about, but I'm really not, is the FDA. This went early again. The FDA gained a lot more power in 1962, so let me remove that slide, that allows them to not only control safety, to regulate based on safety, but also efficacy. So all of a sudden, you have to prove that the drug does exactly what you say it does before it gets out on the market. And that doesn't sound that horrible, but it comes with some ramifications. So one thing I wanted to touch on with this, and we can see some of the pain sort of getting people to try to take action. And some people participate in pharmaceutical tourism. So that's when you go to another country to either get medications that aren't available in the US or to get medications cheaper than they are in the US. And the FDA is, of course, saying that in most circumstances that's illegal. And their focus, they're giving an example here about if a drug is approved by Health Canada, okay, so Canadians can take it, but it's not approved by the FDA, then the FDA cannot ensure the safety and the effectiveness. Okay. But I want to look at this for a moment, because this is just an image to represent something. I just found an image that, somebody in a lab. But, what I want to talk to you about is mislabeling and adulteration. So about 10% of the drugs that are imported into this country are mislabeled or adulterated. In other words, they have stuff in it shouldn't have. Now, this is horrifying to me because, we have certain medications where they tell you, please consult your physician before blah, 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 blah. And they're right. Some of these drugs are dangerous to get off of. We have psychoactive drugs. I mean, imagine if you accidentally get off Ritalin or Prozac. These aren't good chemicals to just not take them for a while. So are you sure it's labeled correctly? What about grandma's High blood pressure medicine. I mean, is this month's batch really the right stuff? We don't know, because like 10% of it's not labeled correctly. So, and here's the thing: the FDA doesn't test that. They don't test that. They review test procedures when somebody's coming up with the process, and here's how we come with their drug, and here's the testing we do on it, and here's the clinical trials that show it's safe and effective. That's what the FDA does. They review all that. They don't test the drug. They don't do that. The only people doing that's the drug company, we hope. And keep in mind, they're not in this country. A lot of them aren't in this country. So when the FDA is talking about they cannot ensure the safety and effectiveness, they're already not ensuring the safety or effectiveness, folks. The only thing they're doing is they're signing off that if it is what it's supposed to be, then the tests that they showed us show it to be safe. That's what they can do now. So I wanted to talk briefly about what happens when you I'm flubbing seriously. This is a different program. Sorry. So another problem is what they call unapproved drugs. So what these are drugs that have been on the market for decades. But the FDA is on a mission to get rid of them. They're unapproved drugs. They're just kind of there de facto because they were there before the FDA was in place. So these drugs kind of got grandfathered in, because you can't just say the FDA has these rights, and responsibilities. Thus, until they catch up with all the drugs, nobody gets any pharmaceuticals. It doesn't work that way. So they're trying to stamp out the last of these. So the FDA, and you can go visit it on their website, the FDA is basically saying, without FDA review, there's no way to know that these drugs are safe and effective. Wait, we're talking about the drugs that have been in use for decades? There's no way to know that those are safe and effective? And they're pointing out here that unapproved drugs have resulted in patient harm. I'm sure they have. So have approved drugs. I mean, the commercials plainly tell you they do. At least with the unapproved drugs that have been on the market for decades, we have a long history of knowing what they are. I mean, even when something goes through a 2 or 3 phase trial and they've approved it, you don't have near the data you do once it gets out in the wild. And that's why every now and then the FDA will sign off on something, and then they have to sort of go back on it. And sorry, I have a cat playing with a cord here. I told you it's just as error prone as live, maybe more so. Anyway, they have a 2-prong approach for assuring patient safety. Number one, the agency encourages manufacturers of unapproved drugs to obtain approval to be legally marketed in the US. So these are drugs that are being sold forever. It's like they're de facto generics. It's some chemical that hospitals have been using for decades. But it doesn't have an approved brand name. So the FDA is encouraging manufacturers to get a brand name. I wonder what techniques they're going to use to encourage them. And no, it's not force. I know a lot of you are screaming, force. It's not. It's bribery. Not exactly, but there's a big juicy reward. We'll see that in a minute. Look, number 2, right there it is. The FDA has worked to remove unapproved drugs from the market. So you and 9 of your competitors manufacture Widgetol, I don't know, and the FDA comes to you and they say, well, gee, golly, we'd like to get dangerous widgetol off the market. So if you'll go through our process and get approved, then you'll be able to sell your brand name, which will then be a legally marketable drug. That way we can crack down on widgetol. So you get where the reward comes from, right? They're basically signaling to companies, you don't have to go look anywhere fancy. You can read these two sentences on their website. Now, I did break it out into bullet points. Go read the website. I mean, all you have to do is read into the language a little bit. Yes, they're going to get rid of your competition. That's your incentive. Oh, sure, your competition might go through the costly process too. But if they don't, maybe it's just cheaper to stop manufacturing that. So, hypothetical? Looky here. Somebody pointed me to some data in healthcare economics policy and organization. Thank you, my favorite pharmacologist. But I saved you from reading the entire text. But basically what happened is you had somebody get the rights to legally market something in September, and spike. Look what happens to the price. And that's of Vasopressin. And, Vasopressin's something that's been used in hospitals for decades. And no, I can't tell you exactly what it does. I could have in February, but it's been a while. Interestingly, I do remember that it can be used with respirators. So I was even wondering at one point how this plays into COVID. And then here you have another drug. I'm not even going to pronounce it, but it's a similar thing. It's been on the been on the market for decades. It's been on the decades for market. It's been on the market for decades. And, around this point in time, the FDA approved a brand name and spike. So this is how the FDA is keeping you safe. It's the same chemical. It's just, this way it's branded. This way the FDA has approved it. And, so if you'd went and had the procedure done, these aren't the dark ages. If you'd went and had a procedure done at a hospital in January of 14, the hospital would have been paying 10 or 13 bucks a pop for this. And if you go back the next January, they're paying 80 bucks a pop. You go back the next January, they're paying 140 bucks a pop. And I mean, the price had been fairly stable for decades. So this is what your safety costs. You're not safer, but you're paying more for it. So chemo, we all hate chemo. We hate the thought of chemo. We love chemo if we have to have it. We hope we don't have to have it. But I picked this image because it was the example my friends gave me of drug supremacy. So the policy has mutated from effectiveness, you had to show that it was effective, to now you have to show supremacy. So what supremacy means is you have to show that it's more effective in the clinical trials than the other drugs on the market. Now, it might be safer, or there can be other things that come into play. Another option is, sometimes just choice is good. Maybe some forms of chemo, for example, hit some patients really, really hard. And doctors sometimes know that. I had an example where it was their blood thinner is basically a vitamin K inhibitor, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you eat a lot of green leafy vegetables, my recollection is it messes with your blood thinner. And if you're on blood thinner and you don't know that for sure, you might want to check with your doctor. I'm not one, but yeah. So anyway, the guy who was educating me about this, his father died because he ate a lot of green leafy vegetables, and it interfered with the medicine he took. Now, it's really difficult to get an alternative medicine on the market because you would have to show that you're superior, you're more effective than the existing drug. And the existing drug is pretty effective as long as you don't eat a lot of green leafy vegetables. And then chemo, you have the same thing. You have these broad spectrum chemotherapies, and chemo's just poison. It's chemical poison. And I don't mean that to sound worse than it is, because it's already pretty bad. And I mean, the people who prescribe it, they know that. We're killing everything. We're just hopefully killing the cancer faster. But to prove that your alternative is more effective is crazy expensive, because part of effective means to show better 5 and 10-year survival rates. So even if you have an awesome drug that just, completely laps the existing broad spectrum chemo, your best case scenario, absolute best case scenario, would be a decade. You're probably looking at more like 15 or 20. Meanwhile, people who we already know are impacted by the broad spectrum chemotherapies, they're just stuck there. Now, there is a loophole when the broad spectrum chemo has been shown to fail. So after they've already used it on you and it's already failed, then they can get into right to try stuff, and they can try some secondary treatments. Then they can try some stuff that isn't approved already as a treatment to that cancer based on its supremacy. So I'll just give up on it. So that's what you get with the FDA keeping you safe. So this is my pitch, and I'm trying to play a few problems against each other, and I want to see what you guys think. And bullet points 1 through 5 get kind of technical. I'm not sure I like them either. I was just March 8th. I was trying to write something to capture the idea. So here's my idea in a nutshell: is I want to legalize import for resale of any pharmaceutical approved for use by Health Canada or the European Medicines Agency or the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia or the Ministry of Health in New Zealand or Britain's National Health Service. Sorry, I didn't bold them. Pursuant to the following stipulations. So let's stop there for a minute. So what I'm saying is, and this is intentionally not scary countries. And as a libertarian, my first thought is, let's just get rid of the FDA, or let's get rid of their monopoly. Let's make it, just sort of like a stamp of recommendation. I'm great with that. Let's do that. Oh wait, Congress is just jam-packed full of Republicans and Democrats, and they might not go for it. We can still pitch that. We can still pitch getting rid of the FDA. But I'm thinking we pitch this as something they could come to because of these stipulations. What I'm doing in the top part is I'm getting people broader choice of therapies. I'm getting their doctors broader choice of therapy. We're not talking about some, third world country. A lot of these are countries the left actually kind of looks up to, mistakenly in my opinion, but they look up to in regard to healthcare. I've had surgery in Britain. It was an emergency. Didn't like it. They're good people. I'm not going to bash them too much. Just I would have rather have been here. That's all. But I wouldn't be shy about, taking a drug they prescribe. That wouldn't scare me. And I particularly wouldn't feel shy about it if I went to my doctor and my doctor said, Britain has a really awesome drug for this. It's all my friends are, really telling me, yeah, sure. My doctor's for it. He's checked into it. He thinks it's good for whatever my issue is. And it's based on, it's approved in Britain. I feel good about it and it's cheap. Okay, sure. So what about that safety discussion? So we can make this safer because remember the 10% that's mislabeled or adulterated? So what I'm going to require in this, now keep in mind, this isn't for things that the FDA is approving. This doesn't apply to anything you can already have. Anything you can already have, I'm not touching that. They can still get it the way they were yesterday. I'm opening an additional door with some qualifiers. The only reason I need those qualifiers is I want to show that we can actually make things safer. So the stipulation is the imported drug has to be serialized. It has to be serialized so that you can take the drug and go bleep and see, aha, this is batch 47, so from blah, blah, blah. So it's got to be serialized. The next thing is importers will have each batch tested by like a testing authority. That's free market. Whoever wants to step up and go, I'll test it. They get to test it. Then we get into the technical garbage, but basically they sign it. So they sign it and say, yes, this batch has been approved as this. Then the importer can sell it. And what I really love about that is we had that testing that, somebody stepped up to do. They're signing it, so they're on the hook for saying it is whatever it says it is, and they can publish that however they want. If they want to say it's less than 1% adulteration, okay. If they want to say a good half of it's what it's supposed to be, that's up to them. That's now granted when I go bleep with my phone and I'm not going to buy that. My doctor is not going to buy that. In Congress doesn't need to decide that. You and your doctor can decide that, and the testing agencies, they'll conform to what you demand because that's how it works. And then I got to the nice part already, didn't I? Is once it's signed, once it's you or the pharmacist or the doctor can look at this drug that you're getting ready to put on the shelf or take off the shelf or hand to your patient, or just whoever's interested in this drug can scan the serialization code and get the results so that they know what's in their hand according to the free market provided tester. And if the tester is botching it, they're not going to last very long. So that's it. Let me know what you think about my little plan. Tomorrow night, we are going to have James Toller on, and James just going to be talking about his platform in general. I'm Robert Perry. I'm running for U.S. Congress for Kentucky 2nd District. I can cheat now. I can see it there and there. That's better. Much helpful. Feel free to go on my website, give me some money to help pay for things, or go to my website and learn more about my other platform issues. Also, I have my candidates page there. Go check out my candidates page. Go see all the other candidates like James Toller, who you can learn more about tomorrow. That's all I have for you today. Come back tomorrow and then come back Friday for the secret surprise. If you're a libertarian, everybody, we're talking about roads. You wouldn't be interested. Very boring. Have a good evening.